and I bet Claudia backed me up on this, they work a lot better when you actually go. Just joining and paying the dues does
Well,
not help.
I'm gonna get a trainer to start out with. I need to build up some muscle mass. So Claudia doesn't know this. I've lost a ridiculous amount of weight, which is awesome, but also problematic because so yeah, gonna be
You
doing the
don't
gym
want to
thing.
be near Franz near a brisk wind because it just picks him up and flies him away.
Well, Franz lost it. Looks like I found it.
No,
Anyways,
You're
I'm
so
working on
hot,
it.
Derek. You're
what
so
is
hot right
it
now.
that makes the
Did
South
somebody not
spicy?
cut
Is it the
Eric's mic?
food?
What is he doing? Why is
Is
he
it the
talking?
nightlife or the brilliance of the man that is the pride of Louisiana when he's not rocking in the courtroom running his own law firm and visiting churches all over the world? He's a staple on court TV, as well as a number of other news outlets, and killing it on social media and on Talk 107.3 with Legally Served and Brian Haldane. He is the incredible Franz Borghardt, joined as always by the Truth or Derek podcast. Hall of Famer, a mere 2 states over, also incredible in the courtroom, on social media, and running his own law firm. You know him from Court TV, CNN, ATL News, One Scripts, and now in the United Kingdom on Sky News, and a million other places when they need great advice. He is the deep digging, tell it like it is, Georgian badass that is Joshua Schiffer, and great returning as well with our gang. You know him as the brilliant author of several great books, such as Defend Your Greatness, Finding Your 2.0, and Fighting for Yourself. He's all over us in the morning, or was with Julie Grant, and is still sometimes in at night with Vinnie Politan, a Court TV staple, as well as a bunch of other media outlets. Inspirational, vegetarian, one heck of an amazing guy, the incredible Kirk Nurmi. And joining us for the first time, not only is she a former law enforcement officer and a certified domestic violence expert, she also hosts one of the best podcasts in the land today in Strong Enough. You know her from a ton of live stuff, delivering brilliant intel on everything from crime to motivation to straight success. She is the terrific Claudia King. Claudia, Josh, Franz, Kirk, how's everyone doing today?
What's the budget looking like for that new announcer? Like, because really, I think we can get that together for a new MC.
I can't send a calendar invite. I logged out of my computer today, so you need an update. I put that on my microphone. So, it's just, no.
I gotta ask before we do anything else. I've got some serious envy of Claudia's like podcasting setup.
Yeah,
kind of situation.
I was gonna say
what it's so awesome. What is
the
that?
pod closet is looking nice.
Yeah, so I'm actually under the stairs. So we built it out, and my husband is responsible for the decor.
That's awesome.
Solid.
Yeah, so
Very
Amazon.
solid.
Yeah, Amazon.
So you're
where
like
do you
doing
keep
the
your
Harry
X-Files
Potter
poster?
What?
I said, where do you keep your X-Files poster?
Oh, yeah. That's in the dungeon, which is 2 doors over.
And that's a different streaming service too.
So Derek, I know off topic. Do you know that there's a Netflix show about building like dungeons, like fun dungeons? And it's like a series where this woman goes to like people's houses who want to have fun dungeons, and like there's a budget, and she dungeons like sex rooms.
Feel free to use
and
that.
So just saying, throw that out there.
I'm not.
Don't really know where I'm going with that.
Was that 2 minutes before we completely got off the rails into sex dungeons, or was that 3?
I'm not fully into buying a sex dungeon, but I have always dreamed of having like a cement spiral staircase stairs going down with like candles on the wall. But I guess that really is the entrance to a sex dungeon, isn't it?
Yes.
It's an aesthetic that says a lot about the owner.
I'm curious about this Truth or Derek podcast Hall of Fame. Is that just a picture of Josh next to a candle? What exactly how would one visit that?
Yes,
it is just Josh right now, but it's a door off the sex dungeon. I got to throw a towel over stuff before people come over.
Okay. All right.
It's near Cooper's Town,
available.
Not there.
This queen.
Well, hold on. Let me actually talk about something vaguely serious,
please.
Which is the fact that we've got Claudia, who is a legitimate domestic violence expert. She is someone who dedicates an enormous amount of her professional work, personal work, her entertainment stuff, and podcasting and education. And as you guys know, DV is my bread and butter. They're my favorite cases because they're always something to talk about. No matter who's presenting your DV case, a claimant, a victim, a defendant, a whatever, there's another side to that story. So I really want to hear from Claudia, kind of where she sees domestic violence almost from that 10,000-foot view, because it's replaced in my universe DUI. As a criminal defense lawyer, DUI was your bread and butter, man. It's the crime that everybody's mom committed. Everybody drinking. I did it. Judge did it. Prosecutor did it. It's the only crime where like no one gets up and is like, man, I want to go DUI today. Let's go get drunk. No, it's not that crime. DV has replaced that. As DUI got crushed by technological stuff like Uber and Lyft and just education, it stopped being the priority. And I've seen what I really appreciate, a focus on domestic violence as kind of one of the most important frontline law enforcement duties. And I'd just love to hear Claudia talk for a couple minutes about where domestic violence is coming from and where domestic violence is going. Because we're also seeing a lot less of there's one side and there's another side. No, it takes two to tango, even if one person's a real some bitch. There's always a little bit of back and forth.
I agree with you on that. And I think we are seeing that a lot, that there is that back and forth. And where I see DV kind of evolving is a lot with police, because almost all the states have changed it to where you shall make an arrest under certain circumstances. So where we used to have, the ability and the discretion to just say, hey, you go to a hotel, you go to your mom's house, I'll take you there, whatever. That is not really an option in a lot of cases anymore, despite what we saw on the tapes with Gabby Petito, which she should have been arrested that day.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah. We keep seeing some pretty flagrant violations.
I don't see anybody shaking their head.
and literally, what Claudia's talking about is my shtick when you come into my office with, hey, it's good to meet you, I'm Josh. 20 years ago, when the cops came out for a DV, they said, you go to your cousin's house, you stay here with the kids, don't make me come back here and arrest all of y'all. And that solved 80%, probably 90% of DV dispatches. But then in that percentage where when DVs go wrong, they don't go a little bit wrong. They go dead person wrong, dead kids wrong, horrific, indefensible violence wrong. And that's why now officers show up, and I tell people, doesn't matter what happened. As soon as an officer is determined there was a primary aggressor and a potential crime, easiest thing for them to do is just lock up somebody and go, we'll let the prosecutors handle the rest of this.
And for those of us who live in the South, one of the things that people in the South love more than anything else is their good old-fashioned gun rights. And there is a direct correlation between being convicted of a crime related to domestic violence in federal law. And once you get that conviction, you can no longer, under federal law, possess a firearm ever again. It's being litigated right now across the country, but that is a thing. And one of the reasons it's so serious to a lot of my clients is, hey, I go hunting, and I don't want to be able to go hunt deer or fowl or whatever. And it makes the stakes even higher. I mean, not to mention you have someone who may really be being abused and hurt and kids and all that. But the stakes of never being able to possess a firearm again on what could be a misdemeanor make it, at least in Louisiana, huge.
And it is the only misdemeanor that permanently affects a constitutional right. Like, people need to understand that. And what Franz is alluding to, I can get you time served on 98% of basic DVs, but you lose your gun. And man, that lose your gun, that's the most important thing. I've got a friend that literally has a whole practice of returning people's gun rights, and he does pretty well with that.
The other issue that I have seen as far as abusers go, or being labeled an abuser, is the ability to arrest somebody, or the different things people can do now to get arrested. Some of them are a little ridiculous. Like in Colorado, if I get mad at you and grab your phone, I have committed domestic violence. If I have done it out of punishment, retaliation, intimidation, coercion, or control, I have now committed domestic violence. So, like we want to protect people, but at the same time, it can be too much. And then if you have somebody that does that and now they don't want to go to jail, they're going to take it 10 steps further when they really didn't have to, but they don't want to lose their gun. So they're just going to go all the way and try to get away with everything they can at that point.
And if the spouse or complainant, victim, whatever, knows the gun issue, because it's been discussed, don't call the police. They call the police, I'm never going to be able to hunt again. I'm never going to be able to shoot again. And it really, when you talk about the complexities of being a participant, there's not really a more complex crime. We get so many cases. One of the first questions, how the police get notified. It's one thing if it's the complainant making a 911 call, or oftentimes the person who gets arrested eventually is the one that made the 911 call. That happens all the time. But the tough one is none of us called the police. It was a neighbor who heard yelling. And from a practical perspective, that's terrible. I can't fight how the police show up, Fourth Amendment. Nope, man, that was a dispatch from a concerned citizen. Cops get to investigate that. They just do. So it absolutely removes some of my arguments when that's happened. And it really gets interesting when you have, of course, the putative victim, complainant, whatever. They're almost 50, 70, 80% of the time against prosecuting their alleged abuser. And that puts a very interesting pressure on your local prosecutor, who prosecutors hate DV cases. They are amongst the least enjoyable parts of being a prosecutor.
So, Claudia, can I just tail off that? Because what they were saying was, or sorry, what you were saying is you could take somebody's phone. We were going to talk about Puff Daddy anyways. So you have that video of whatever the hell he was up to. Do you find that as you get more and more into this, that the waters are very muddy? Like, is there a clear line in your head of what domestic violence is? Because if beating a woman up at a hotel pretty violently gets you 18 months probation, and that the police can still be called for getting a phone, it seems like there is no definitive answer here.
Not as far as the law is concerned. I think it is too strict right now in a lot of states. And that's the problem. And that's coming from somebody who wants to protect victims and wants to make sure that, one day we don't have any DV. I don't think that's going to happen while any of us are around, unless we live to like 472. But, to me, it's physical violence or emotional violence that, creates some sort of esteem issues, coercion, control. But yeah, like if I get mad at you and grab your phone away because we were in an argument, like, should I go to jail over that? I don't think so.
I've seen an influx of throwing phones
Yes.
that have led to domestic arrests. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I mean, if I got arrested every time I ever threw a phone, but
we've got the law here in Georgia where aggravated assault needs some sort of implement involved. So generally it was a gun or a knife or a brick or something like that. But then we had a case that came out and applied choking to aggravated assault, which has now been interpreted by investigating police officers as, did you touch the neck anyway? All right, so that's a choking. Most often spelled as a chucking because they don't know how to spell. And really, it gets ridiculous because an otherwise misdemeanor gets arrested as a garbage felony. In Georgia, you have a constitutional right to a bond for a misdemeanor. Felony? You said. And there are certain communities that their flavor of justice is everybody gets arrested for a DV. It's an automatic felony because it gives us 2, 3, 4 weeks to let people cool off, and then we'll review the case and bust it down to a misdemeanor so they get a bond. And it's nakedly clear that it's a manipulation, but it's absolutely legal in Georgia. You can't do anything about it. State gets to pick what charges they want to go pursue. You have due process. It just takes a long time. And it's interesting because that's, how, of course, how they squeeze people is, well, if you want a good deal and a real justice, you got to spend some time in jail and let us investigate and go to another calendar. But if you just want to plead guilty to something, well, I'm sure we can work that out right now. And that is, unfortunately, especially if someone has any kind of record and is not going to get a bond, man, that's how you get the I'm innocent, but I pled guilty, because it's the only way for them to move.
Well, I want to go back to that in a second, because I know Kirk's been awfully eerily quiet. And when originally I was going to start, I wanted to kick something over to him, because we haven't talked about Kohberger at all, because this whole trial went by when we were talking with other people and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing that confused me the most about this whole thing was, I thought like the death penalty was set for cases like this. Like, I understand a first degree murder charge, somebody plans it, they go ahead, they kill a friend or a significant other or whatever it is. Murder is murder, it's bad, but murder happens and you can't put everyone on death row. But I thought a case like Kohberger, this seems like something that is like a lock for a death penalty case, and it was floated, but I don't even think it was taken seriously. Like, is it the prosecution not wanting to go through with it, or it's just let's just put this thing to bed and move on?
Well, it can be a couple different things, but we have to remember when we talk about the death penalty, that is a sentencing enhancement above and beyond the typical first degree murder case. It comes completely at the discretion of the prosecutors. So there is no situation, there is no state which would say you kill, as a matter of fact, they've been deemed unconstitutional. For example, you kill a police officer, you automatically facing the death penalty. Laws like that do not exist. It is for the prosecutors to make the discretion of whether they're going to go above and beyond the typical sentence for first degree murder. And that is why juries, any aggravating factors and any enhancement above the normal penalty has to be cited by a jury. That's why we have that unanimity component of the death penalty in terms of, at least most states, I know Florida has shifted, but they require that a jury unanimously find that a person is open to the death penalty. So what the prosecutors can do then in that regard is they can put that, give notice that they're going to seek that enhanced penalty, but then it becomes like anything else. It becomes something that can be pled down. It can be pled down as like a first degree murder could be pled to a second degree murder to a manslaughter. So a death penalty, capital punishment, potential sentence can be pled down to life in prison. And that's what we saw here. So it can be a penalty. Certainly, there's plenty of reasons to justify it. I mean, each state has what they call sentencing enhancements. And they say, if you've done this, aggravating factors, if you've done this, then you're eligible for the death penalty. And the state goes through it, and like multiple victims, I mean, pretty much in every state, any murder is death penalty eligible. The prosecutor just decides whether they want to seek to impose that or not, but it can be used as a bargaining chip, if you will, and then it becomes a matter of resolution. One of the things that can happen in a death penalty case is, even if a sentence is imposed, a death sentence is imposed, it's probably going to be on average between 10 and 15 years before that penalty is imposed, and that keeps the case going, it keeps things going, it keeps the families involved, what have you. And I've been involved in many death penalty cases where they're certainly not as high profile as Kohberger, at least ones that settled. But those cases, the families may want some closure, and just to put it behind them and to not have those appeals and things like that. And I think that's really what we saw manifest in the Kohberger case. And maybe there's reasons, because the defense puts forward mitigation. Maybe there's reasons they're not so sure that they can get the death penalty, because there's a lot of cases you get someone in there who's a good defense attorney and they keep their client off death row. It can't happen, right?
Because you ain't trying it to win. You're trying it to keep the guy off death row.
Right. And
well, winning is life.
Keeping him off there.
Right.
Yeah. You redefine what a win is.
So your trial strategy, everything becomes geared around that, and that means the state of Idaho maybe thought, hey, we're not 100% successful. We can, and really, Derek, here's another thing: 50% of death penalty verdicts, the sentencing, I should say, the sentencing portion, are overturned based on error of either the counsel or the judge. That's half. That's half. And that means another trial on the sentencing phase portion. So that idea of putting out the death penalty, putting forward that mitigation, showing the state you may not get the death penalty. Even if you do, there's a 50% chance it's going to be overturned. And the victim's family says, I just want to be done with this because I need to begin my healing process. Not now, not 10 or 15 years down the road. That's how we see the kind of resolution we saw in Colberg. I know that's a long answer, but ultimately that's it. That's how
So when I screened as a prosecutor, when I was screening homicide cases that could fit into the category of first-degree murder capital, I'll tell you on more than one occasion, the victims' families were like, I want this dude to rot. I don't want him to be put to death. I want him to rot in Angola for the rest of his life. And I'm like, giddy up. Okay. Sometimes, and look, I learned this as a public defender, defending capital cases. A lot of young defendants, they don't want to have a life sentence. You got a guy that's in their young 20s who didn't think they would make it to 30 anyway. They're like, I'd rather be put to death than spend the rest of my life in jail. And I would tell victims, I'm like, if you're asking me what I think, he doesn't want to do a life sentence or she doesn't want to do a life sentence. They would rather be put to death. And it's a weird system. But I'll tell you, once as a prosecutor, once they would tell me, hey, I don't want to spend the next 20 to 50 years litigating this and I want him to rot, when I went to the grand jury, I would pursue a life offense homicide, which for us was a second degree murder or a first degree non-capital. And that was that. And it was an easy decision. And when I was asked by the press, why did you do this? It was an easy conversation of, I gave deference to the victim's family. This is what they wanted in terms of justice.
Isn't the average wait time on death row like between 18 and 21 years or something? I know because we talk about Mangino's book all the time.
My understanding is 10 to 15 is my understanding of it. But
yeah, because Mangino and I were talking about, there was a case he covered in his book where the guy got the DP, I think in 98 or 99, and he was one of the first guys they put to death this year.
Well, it can depend on the amount of appeals and everything else in terms of ineffective assistance of counsel, the psychological condition of an inmate at the time of execution as opposed to even the time of the trial. So when we talk about that 50% number, I don't know that it includes it doesn't include error that happened during the trial phase or the sentencing phase. There's a lot of other cases that could be overturned. You know, you see many different challenges, mental health, what have you, that precludes the execution of an individual. So, yeah, I mean, that's why Franz is right. I mean, there are a lot of defendants that don't want that life term and, you know, would rather have the death penalty. And that's one thing the prosecutors can do to ensure the misery of the accused, if you will.
So, okay, mental health, obviously an issue. And like I said, I know Claudia's covered the Slender Man trial, but how much do you, maybe Claudia, you can go first. How much mental health do you try to process in some of these cases before you kind of get to the bottom line is this person going to reoffend when they get out? Because like,
it's not just that though. It's not just that. It is this mental health nugget information such that one juror, with the exception of the barbaric systems that require non-unanimous death penalty, is one juror going to look at this and say, I don't want to put this dude to death because of this mental health mitigation? That's the real question.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think there are so many people now that are really sympathetic to mental health issues. There's becoming less stigma around them, so more people are talking about it. So more people know somebody that's got something going on. So like Franz said, there's going to be potentially that one juror that's going to look at that individual and it's going to remind them of someone in their life, and they're going to think, even though they're not really supposed to do that, but they're going to think, wow, if Aunt Sally had a bad day and went and did this, is she going to die? And so I think that's happening now.
Because guess what? You can explain and connect with, I wanted to kill somebody. Because guess what? I've wanted to kill somebody.
Every day when I'm stuck in traffic.
Yeah, like, look, have I lost control briefly in my life? Oh, yes. I've had a couple flashes of no control. Thankfully, didn't result in me committing a horrific crime. Certainly could have if there'd been a gun right there, which is why it's not that guns are good or bad. It's where are the guns and what is the mental health of the person like at that moment when a gun happened to be available. Because you can be great 99% of the time, but that one thing happens, you suddenly are looking at death penalty. But back to what what Derek really started with, where how Kohberger, this is that case. If you go talk to your electorate and go, hey, 4 innocent college kids brutally murdered middle of the night by basically a complete stranger, that's the death penalty. That's how you get the death penalty passed in your state. But then when you look at applying it, reverse roles with that prosecutor. He had 4 college kids. Now, in college, I did a lot of stuff my parents were proud of. I also did many things they would not be proud of. That in a death penalty prosecution and defense, you're going to explore that. And I'm not defaming, libeling, slandering any of these absolute victims. But if I'm a parent and I'm involved in this horrific set of circumstance, do I want my kid's life being picked apart in a way where, fair or not, stuff comes out? We don't know these kids, these victims, to the degree that, we would if we went through a death penalty. And I think that the DA made a really smart choice erring on, well, a couple of these families do not want the death penalty, do not want this. Yes, there's 1 or 2 that are just pounding the tape. We want blood. We want justice. We want revenge. That staying away from that, taking the death penalty off the table to get the case done. What a stroke of genius by the DA, because he saved them all millions of dollars, got an absolute sentence that is fantastic. Like, it's a big win for the state.
But going back to, again, trying to decide between cases for mental health and all that, because most of the people that you talk to, they'll say like, oh yeah, well, much like myself, we call them NIMBYs. You ever heard this term? Not in my backyard.
Oh yeah.
I'm all for the Slender Man killer to get out. Okay, she was 12 years old and she's 21 now, I think. Do I want her living in the house next to me? No. You could live somewhere else. You could have freedom somewhere else.
But the reality
I
is,
try not to sound like an elitist asshole here, but it's like there's a reason why housing is cheaper near prisons and airports, because life there isn't so good.
So, but remember, Derek, the reality is that argument kind of caves when we're talking about a murder case where they're going to be in a correctional facility for the rest of their life. They're not going to be living next door to you. And yeah, you could argue, well, are they going to kill other inmates? Statistically, I don't know that.
Yeah, that's not a big demographic.
Yeah, and in fact, Kohberger is probably a higher risk of getting killed than
without question,
yeah. So it is. Look, I am 100% in agreement that those human beings exist. That they're like, I don't know if I want this human being breathing and possibly doing this to my family. But the reality during jury selection is, well, you do realize if they get convicted and you have a decision for life or death, life means, in most states, my state at least, life means life. They're not getting out ever.
It is unusual when you see when you're watching any true crime television and all that, and they'll be like, in 2014, so-and-so got a life sentence. They have since been released. And you're like, that was only 10 years ago.
I'll say, Georgia, our sentences aren't meaningless, but what you got sentenced to and what's going to happen are very different. There are some strict rules. Can't get paroled out on certain charges till 85%. But there's a lot of you can get out because let's just face it, a grain, elderly, geriatric prison population is dumb. And long-term incarceration, it's got a couple purposes. Certainly insulate my kids and family and community from people that do bad things, but the ability to do bad things declines rapidly with age, as well as the animus and intent to do those things. Locking up 50, 60-year-old people that committed a crime of passion, greed, whatever, when they were 25, and it's kind of dumb. It's different when it's the punishment of, no, you did something so awful, it's punishment. But we were talking about this last night on Vinny's show with the car wreck on the fancy Pacific Coast Highway, where kids driving 108 miles an hour. Man, I've defended lots of kids speeding. Kid had a wreck. Man, I've defended lots of kids who had a wreck. This wreck, he hit another parked car that then ran into 4 people on the sidewalk and killed all 4 of them. So they charged him with murder and are trying to put him in prison for the rest. And I'm like, well, he did take 4 lives directly as a result of reckless behavior. But is the purpose of our system to take someone who committed something that, absent this specific, there happened to be 4 people there, and put him in prison for the rest of his life, versus what a different form of justice should be? And that's really hard for our system to account, because guess what? 4 amazing kids are dead. But the kid that did it, I don't think he ever speeds again. I'd be willing to bet he drives a lot better for the rest of his life. He just got popped on something that, hold on, every teenager that I'm aware of did some reckless shit in a car. And that's the what's fair about our system. Because in 99% of the time, that incident is kid wrecks car into other car, thank God isn't dead. Hopes he learns his lesson. Well, there were 4 people on the sidewalk and they're dead. So now we're going to put him in prison for the rest of his life. Hey, there's a disconnect there. And charging him with murder, which was a DA's choice. And then back to death penalty, what we're really getting at is the fact that death penalty becomes a negotiation tool. And the gross part of it is, hey, Josh, we're going to give Franz the death penalty for his role in the case that he's co-defendant, unless you admit what really happened. So, by the way, whether Franz dies, we're going to put that on you, Schiffer, who's also a defendant. Now, that's where we start getting into some ethical considerations that most people never consider. Franz and I actually met a guy from Indiana 10 years ago who that's what happened. And eventually all of them got released because of that and some other terrible stuff. But they literally threatened the co-defendants, if you don't take a plea, we're killing your friends. And it's your decision.
Okay, so I'd like to ask all 4 of you as a question, because you're all very familiar with the way the law works. And but on the other side of it, let's say the guy who hit the car that killed the 4 people. Again, maybe Kirk, you can go first. In your experience with a longer jail sentence, let's say it's 5+ years, 5 to 15 years, is the point of this to punish? Is the point of this to punish the person that did it, kind of set an example, or is the point of this to hope that they rehabilitate themselves? Because I think you want both, but I don't think you get both.
Well, you know, your question is more of a philosophical one about punishment, but let me say it this way. You talk about reformation. When you talk about that, you're really not, I mean, there's not a lot of reform in the sense that rehabilitation, that sort of thing, because as Josh said, when he brought up that case, you know, that's not atypical behavior. So really, to me, when you have a case like that, the focus is punishment, and it does become, to a certain extent, sending a message, right? And getting justice for those victims that were hit by the car. So in the hopes that such behavior doesn't repeat itself. So, you know, this is kind of a unique set of circumstances where there's no necessarily deviancy other than the speeding, right? And maybe 90% of the kids get away with that, right? So, you know, ultimately, I think this is about punishment. It's about bringing justice to those lives, and it's about sending a message to other teams.
Franz?
So, the interesting thing for me is on both sides, my observation has been that when we're talking about like negligent homicides where the stakes are lower, but like it's someone who may have killed somebody and they didn't really mean to, those individuals are self-punishing themselves far more than a jail sentence would ever do. If we're talking about a dad that left a gun out and their son or daughter killed themselves or shot themselves, or if we're talking about a negligent driver, if we're talking about something like that, the punishment is, the self-punishing is going to be far greater. I will tell you, and I live in a state where we love putting people away for big numbers. Louisiana ain't afraid to put someone.
You guys beat
in
us
jail.
even with the Angola
Yeah,
stuff, the life stuff.
The home of alligators and prisons.
It's nuts. Y'all give away life without more than any other state.
I think the phenomenon, like, okay, so we were talking about Kohlberger. The Kohlbergers of the world are a different classification of murder.
Agreed.
Right? That's a different, like and going back to DV, the guy that kills a loved one under the domestic circumstances of catching them be unfaithful. Well, that's like the textbook definition of a manslaughter, unless it's premeditated and all that. So the problem is the different flavors of homicide kind of have different flavors. And I'll end on this note. One of our most famous homicides that was captured on news footage in an airport in Baton Rouge, Gary Plochet, dude's sitting there hiding on a phone because they're extraditing the guy
on video. This is a great bit of film if you've never seen this.
Yeah, whole thing's on video.
Yeah.
They're extraditing the guy who had been sexually molesting and abusing his son. And they're bringing him back to the airport. This is in the 80s. Airport security is a little different back then. So he's lying in wait on the payphone.
At the phone bank that we've all seen where it's 10 phones in a row, and he's just sitting there talking like a regular guy as the cops perp walk with cameras everywhere.
Shoots him once, dead, puts the phone back on the hook. That guy got felony probation for murdering someone on video.
Oh my God.
Everybody understood. Different kind of murder, different flavor.
There are 3 defenses at law. It wasn't me, I didn't do it, and he needed killing. And guess what? You touch my kid, you touch my spouse, you touch my parent, there's at least 1 out of 12 Georgians that go, okay. And I tell prosecutors that regularly. I'm like, listen, he did something that I wouldn't have done, and I understand that is technically but in reality, we got to deal with the fact of what jurors would do. And jurors can justify some violence and some bad choices very quickly.
I have loved the few times I've gotten to make the argument. Few times, not always successfully, they had it coming.
Yeah.
No use crying over spilt milk. It's a tough one. It doesn't always work, but I'll tell you, when it works, it works. And it's generally a plea. And it's generally a prosecutor who's like, yeah, if that was my kid, I'd probably have done the same thing.
I do remember when we had the chat a little while ago with Dr. Curry Myers, when he was talking about like when he was younger and a cop in Kansas. Man, you didn't want to fuck around in Kansas because they were like, no, we'll deal with this outside. Sorry, Josh.
That's the good old days. That's the good old days. You can't do that
Josh
anymore.
and Claudia, same question to you. Do you think prison's more about rehabilitation or punishment?
I think it's about punishment, because when you walk into virtually any prison, I don't think you walk in and go, wow, this is really a place where people can learn and grow and thrive and come out better than they were before.
But they painted such nice colors on the wall in the day room.
Right. Like, it just looks amazing. So I think the longer that you have people in prison as well, they just get worse a lot of times because they adapt to that prison life that is a different, community and society than we live in. So you're not going to get somebody out of there, I think, after 30 years that's going to be rehabilitated and happy and better and going to live a great life. Occasionally that will happen, but that if we want it to be rehabilitation, then we need to do something differently.
Yeah,
And paint the day room.
And that's where I agree with what you guys. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It really depends on what the purpose of the prosecution is. So I do a lot of substance abuse, mental health. I quit drinking in 2008. I know lots about substance abuse, blah, 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 blah. Prison can be rehabilitative because it's part of that person's pathway to finding bottom. And you can't sentence somebody to sobriety. You can't force people to quit doing anything. They've got to find it themselves. And unfortunately, prison's really good at going, hey, you keep using, you're going to get more of this.
I've seen potato wine and banana vodka.
They are the most creative people in the world. Had we put prisoners on science tests to cure cancer, it'd be done. It's amazing how productive they can be. The art is fantastic. But there's that and there are legitimate rehabilitative goals in modern penal policy. But really, when you're talking about the big cases, punishment outweighs all of that. You're over 5-10 years in prison. There ain't no more rehabilitation because of what Claudia's saying. You get remade serving 5 or 10 years. You ain't coming out the way you went in. I don't care. You're just not. And especially with the emphasis on big crimes with solitary confinement, we've got these just horror stories of what happens to brains. I've worked with some of these, almost always men. It's ridiculous to talk with these guys after 10, 20, 30 years in a prison facility. So let's just take the bullshit of, it's gonna rehabilitate him on big, because it doesn't. Let's also take away deterrence, because deterrence, it works for nice, reasonable people during nice, reasonable parts of their life. But everybody during the heat of whatever's happening very easily justifies the risks that they're taking, because incarceration isn't known by people. They have no idea what it's really like. And the existential, don't kill someone because you can be put to death. That's not going through your mind when you're killing people. You're pulling out a gun ready to shoot. Well, let's think about whether George is going to have an effective death. No.
Quick, let's go to Kansas and have this argument.
Better only do that up in Massachusetts or one of these other. Man, Georgia loves killing
Massachusetts. Get in the car. Kirk, get the car.
It's the same argument that I've made in the past about, I know that restraining orders, protective orders are a sexy thing to talk about now, especially with murder, DAV, and all that. That piece of paper ain't gonna stop you from murdering somebody if you're gonna murder them.
Shit.
You're going to wave it there and hold it in front of you as a shield?
Yeah. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, it's a really useful tool for notice, and it helps the state if there's other things. It ain't going to save you if they want to hurt you. We had a famous case for the judge I clerked for where it was the failing of the system because she gave the complainant all the protection a TPO and could give, but they weren't locking up the bad guy, who then went and shot the shit out of her. And it literally, she was in there, go, Judge, please protect me. He's gonna kill me. And you can go to the police, you can get a gun, I can give you a temporary protective order, I can do all this stuff. But if he's gonna kill you, courts can't stop that. Courts aren't gonna stop that.
That's actually a really good question for Claudia. So the piece of paper is not gonna work. So what would be your advice to someone who maybe they don't realize they're in a case of domestic violence, or if they think that if that happens and you get a restraining order, that's a solution? Like, what is the next step, I would say, to kind of protect yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would tell them to do it really just for the record. You have a paper trail now.
Super important.
But while understanding that this is not going to necessarily deter this person. So you have to understand that, but we're still going to do it because we want that paper trail. So what I'm going to recommend is more along the lines of vigilance and, being on the lookout, Yes, like, load your house with weapons if you're comfortable doing that. Get a dog, perhaps. Change up your routine. Move. Like, you have to protect yourself because, unfortunately, nobody else is going to do it for you. And the sooner that victims or survivors realize that and start to take control of their own safety versus thinking somebody else is going to save them, it's going to do them a big service for themselves.
Absolutely. Because we're skipping over the idea that in certain protective order cases specifically, it actually is an aggravator. It's throwing,
Right.
gasoline on a fire, especially when we get to the colloquially called gun nuts, because in Georgia, you give up your guns when they serve you with that. Now, enforcement of that is a big question. Rural Georgia sheriffs do not take away your guns because they don't want to get murdered serving protective orders.
That's
And
legit.
and Larry, that's a discussion we're having in Georgia right now with red flag laws. Is if anybody can basically go do a red flag law DV report, and the response every time is, well, the sheriffs are going to go by their house and search their house for fire. Whoa, okay. We're going to have a barricaded suspect a week in Georgia with, they ain't getting my guns. I'm going down the, Waco style. They'll, in a heartbeat. And there will be people supporting them going, hell yeah, you ain't going to let the sheriff come take your guns. The sheriffs would say, we ain't in the business of taking people's guns. This is Georgia. You get a gun kind of if you ask for one. And I get it. It's terrifying that I live in a state where you default is that they've got a gun. But that's the way that it works now.
Good place to be a lawyer, though.
It's why the solution is mandatory insurance. Every firearm has to have $1 million umbrella. And if you don't have your insurance card, the gun is automatically forfeited and destroyed.
Now, one last question, because as usual, the time goes way too damn fast. And again, maybe Kirk.
Yeah, and I got to drop off in 4 minutes.
Yeah. So we haven't been able to. We haven't talked since the whole Puff Daddy thing kind of wrapped. Now, when this started, it was it's going to be the biggest RICO trial ever, and Jennifer Lopez is going to spill her guts, and Beyonce is going to go to jail, and the whole thing. And this thing it ran out of steam almost immediately. I'm curious, and maybe afterwards, Franz, you can put on your prosecutor hat. But what happened? Like, did this start out this way, or was there's something got muddied halfway through where they said, you know what, let's just take what we can get?
I'm going to say something because then I'm literally going to leave. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you to all of you. But here's what happened. The federal prosecution was specifically because that video got out and made the prior law enforcement look indefensible. Because guess what? A bunch of forces got together and prevented an otherwise slam dunk major prosecution against a celebrity. Because guess what? Celebrities have the power to make stuff go just like it. We all know. And it is an embarrassment that they then put on a performative show with the garbage of a RICO that they clearly did not have the justification for, but they were too chicken to just bring it on. Hey, Diddy, you like stooping people and bringing them across state lines because they don't have straight up interstate Mann Act prosecutions ever because it's a giant waste of time. And I think Puff Daddy is a POS. I've seen him beat on. It fits so many class things. I bet Claudia could talk forever on, and that's the flag, and that's the flag, and here's some more flags, and here's a truck full of flags. And it was the failure of everything else that forced our nation to watch one of America's most beloved black celebrities get hoisted on a petard that he didn't necessarily deserve. And it was just stupid and wasteful way to address the failures of other law enforcement. And I love all of you, and I hate to have to run it.
Tell Cheryl we all said hi.
Yeah, I will. Bye, y'all. We will do this again soon.
So, Kirk, back to you. I was under the impression that with the Puff thing, they had something in their back pocket with illegal guns or something. Like, there again, you heard so much stuff at the beginning. There was going to be a minimum 10-year sentence for gun trafficking and all this. And again, it just, I don't know where it fell apart.
Well, I don't either, right? I go back to that those videos we saw when the case in the inception of the case, right? Remember the FBI and various agencies storming his various homes and seizing all his videotape and things of that nature. And you're thinking, okay, well, that is not going to end well for Puff Daddy, right? And the question really becomes, did they charge the right crimes? And I'd be curious what Franz has to say about that, because I haven't done anything in federal court. But I'm wondering if they didn't charge the wrong crimes because maybe they didn't have the evidence that the guns were being transported. Mann Act prosecutions, which is taking a person over state lines for sexual purposes. Mainly, it was an anti-prostitution act that's like, I don't know, 250 years old, maybe 200 years old, where there's not a lot of prosecutions under it. So, you know, and the defense did a good job. I mean, they accepted, they said this is repulsive behavior. He's a domestic abuser, but he didn't do all these other things. So there had to be a real disconnect. And I'm wondering, maybe they should have prosecuted him in state court for various state crimes, what have you, because I think there's a lot there. But they went this route, and I think we see the RICO prosecutions are probably some of the easiest to fall apart, because we saw it with YSL as well. This
Halfway
idea
through,
that,
after he had already spent, what did they say, like $12 million to say,
Right.
oh, fuck it, we're done.
this record label that was supposedly a criminal racketeering operation, those things are very hard to prove. But when you break things down into domestic violence, what we saw in the hotel video, and various other things that could have been handled at state court, like I say, I'll be curious what Franz has to say about it. I think they would have been much more successful.
Interesting.
Oh, I think he would have gotten convicted of a myriad of crimes in state court. I think the statute of limitations may have run on some of them, or if not all of them. I think there was a lot of dominoes that did not fall the way the feds thought. I think they thought there was going to be child pornography on some of the hard drives. There wasn't. Because we know there wasn't, because if there had been, he would have been prosecuted for it. He's not a prohibited person with regard to the firearms. Maybe they thought some of the firearms were going to be either like illegal or whatever. And the fact of the matter is, he had enough money and bandwidth to get legal guns, and he's not prohibited. So what I struggled with as a federal defense attorney, I was never a federal prosecutor. Those cases generally are so airtight. I mean, they're triable, but they're airtight that, like, you don't see these kind of cases get tried in the federal courthouses. RICO was always a stretch. It was always a stretch. I think that they thought that we're going to make the jury hate him so much that will carry us to the finish line. And he is very hateable. But it didn't carry them.
And that's why I thought that all that came out at the same time. It was the police raids, it was the guns, it was the videos. Like, the whole thing was very well timed when all this stuff was happening. And then, you know, you just figured that the pot was stewing and it was going to be this trial of the century thing. And then it was just, and again, Claudia, I'm curious if it's like, do younger people see this and think, Jesus Christ, if I become a rap guru where I can do whatever the fuck I want, I can hit women, I can get guns and drugs and this and that, and if I get caught, well, I'll get a slap on the wrist and that'll be that.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I want to say that poor little old lady juror had to watch the freak off, and I feel super bad for her because that was the one thing she said she didn't want to do. But yeah, I think, you know, if you just look at it on its face, then yeah, people are seeing, you know, oh, he's Diddy or Puff Daddy, whatever we're calling him now. I don't know which name we're on today. Are we Puff Daddy now again?
Sure. Perfect. Sean Combs.
Yeah. So Mr. Sean, you know, I think they do see this very successful individual who got away with everything. And it is a little disheartening. But what they don't see is kind of what Franz and Kirk were talking about, is that it was handled entirely wrong by law enforcement and the prosecution. They just didn't do things correctly. The victims, while yes, they are victims, they're domestic violence victims, which wasn't the charge. They were able to, I don't want to say discredit them necessarily, but, you know, kind of, well, hey, you stuck around, you know, it wasn't so bad that you left. which is a great tactic to use because a lot of people don't understand that. And I know they tried to have a DV expert there to explain that, but again, that wasn't the charge. And so I think the jury was smart enough to be able to parse it all out and say, yeah, this is a shitty dude, and like, I don't want to hang out with him, but we can't convict him of these things. And I think Franz is right. They were hoping, the prosecution was hoping, we can make everybody hate this guy, and they'll just say, we hate him so much, just throw him in the dungeon, throw away the key, and everything's fine. And that just wasn't the case.
They used the word in the beginning, the word human trafficking was thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, I thought human trafficking in the worst of ways. And then when the trial came, it was like, well, yeah, it's human trafficking, but like that's not what I think of.
Yeah.
It's like
in
light.
human traffic. Yeah, it's like I've said before, it is absolutely human
The
trafficking.
Diet
but
Coke
with
of
like,
human trafficking.
well, it's a lowercase
Yes.
h, a lowercase t, and
Yeah.
that, and I think jurors just look at that human trafficking component and are like, some people just don't think prostitution's illegal anyway. Like
Well, in some
they
states it's
shouldn't
not.
be illegal. Yeah.
Right.
So, and look, the other side of it. Let's not mince words. He had a good defense team.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was not. I mean, it was no Josh Schiffer, but I mean, it was still impressive. So,
Well, maybe if he breaks the law next time, it'll be in Georgia and we'll get to see Josh on TV. But for more Josh
Really
about
hope so.
Schiffer, maybe you need advice, maybe you need a lawyer, maybe you got caught building a sex dungeon in your basement. Check him out on Twitter at Lawyer Schiff or on Instagram at Lawyer Schiff or at www.jdgrouplaw.com, or reach out to me for another loving spoonful of Franz Borghardt. Check him out on Twitter at Borghardt Law, on Instagram at Franz Borghardt, or for legal stuff in Louisiana at www.borghardtlawfirm.com. For more Kirk Nurmi, buy the books, maybe even the Jodi Arias one, at Indigo or at Amazon.ca or Amazon.com. Check him out on Twitter at Nurmi Unchained and on Facebook at Kirk Nurmi and join the club. That's where you can find all of his amazing stuff. And for everything in the exciting world of Claudia King, visit her web address at www.claudiamking.com. Check her out on Twitter and Instagram at Real Claudia King and on Facebook at Claudia King. Josh, even though you're gone, Franz, Claudia, Kirk, thank you so much. We actually got to cover a few things today and not go on about building weird shit in your basement and getting caught. Thank you guys so
Who's
much.
getting
That
We
was-
caught?
didn't even
Nobody's
bring up
getting
fast
caught around
food, Derek. That's so good.
you guys
good.
were amazing, man. It's just a knockout every time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.